In Duluth, there is a place where homeless people and homeowners for many years lived together. It's called Loaves Fishes. It was founded by a young couple, Angie Miller and SteveO'Neil, in a simple two-story house. They shared this house with their children, several live-in volunteers, and more than a half-dozen homeless people. Loaves Fishes is more than just a shelter. The volunteers are trying to create a new kind of community where work and money and life are shared. Minnesota Public Radio producer Stephen Smith spent some time at Loaves Fishes in Duluth to find out why they chose to share their home and devote their lives to difficult and charitable work.
Well, hamburger helper.
Hamburger helper. What a special treat. I'm SteveO'Neil, and we're at Loaves Fishes house on Jefferson Street in Duluth. We generally have about 7 or 8 guests here with us in this house. There's 5 other community members, including Angie Miller.
Steve's wife. What makes us different than a lot of agencies and shelters is that everyone is entitled, just by being a person, to a place to sleep and enough to eat. And, those kind of basics, without any questions asked, some people stay here and we don't know their last name.
Our kitchen, living room, and dining room was an inch underneath water. And we stopped paying the rent so that we could get it fixed. We went into court, and the judge said, you have to pay the rent or move. That's when we couldn't find another place. That's when we contacted Steve.
The whole community notion comes from both Angie's and my experience in growing up in big families where there was a sense of community. We both lived in households of 10, 11, 12.
I grew up in a family that had a lot of foster children, many, many children my parents took in, as well as a few adults who didn't have anywhere to go, either friends or relatives or other people. And so, I think that's kind of how I came to be here and came to want to share my house with other people.
I was working up north on a horse ranch in Alborn, and I had to have carpal tunnel surgery done on both my hands. And I had a daughter that was born, and she went into a temporary foster care setting. The foster care mother told me about Angie that works here.
When I leave, I know that tomorrow I can always come back, and the door is always open, and the phone's always on, and they never try to turn you away in the wrong way. They turn you away in the right way to say, well, not today, but maybe tomorrow, which is very hospitable of them.
We could, of course, have jobs in a shelter, but I just think the quality of this house, I think, since we do live here and it is our house, it is a lot better than any shelter that I've ever been in or visited. Now, several people who are living here now have lived here 5 or 6 months, and there are some very close ties between people here, and I don't think that we would experience that if we just did this 8 hours a day.
Well, was he panicking?
Yep. Picked them up and it was just great. Yeah. This is Loaves Fishes house, and Angie, myself, and our 2 kids, Brendan and Bree, live here, as well as Liz and Richard in the community. And then we do primarily hospitality for homeless men from northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, and also for Central American refugees, mostly from Guatemala and El Salvador on their way to Canada, just up the border. Across the street, Hannah House is across the street, a couple doors down. It's our hospitality house for families. We have families, again, from the same area around Duluth here. And John and Frank live there, part of the community, and the community members are people who have made a commitment to living and working in the community. They live permanently in a sense that, they make some kind of commitment a year or whatever.
The name Loaves Fishes came from, of course, the story in the New Testament where there was just a few fishes and a few loaves, and it was multiplied to feed 5,000. And so we thought it was a good name for this house because in the beginning it was just Steve and I and very little money and no ongoing support or anything really, and we just hoped it would multiply, which it has. And the house for families is Hannah House, and that came from a woman in the Old Testament who was the mother of Samuel. And there's a couple of verses in there called the Song of Hannah, and it's kind of her vision of peace and justice, really. It's a beautiful poem. We wanted a woman's name for that house since it's mostly women and children.
We're at Hannah House, which is, we bought this house last November with the help of primarily a Christian fellowship group from UMD, University of Minnesota Duluth, faculty and administrators.
I want a drink of water.
Okay. They liked the idea of this house, and I think they wanted about, I think at the time they were asking $28,000 for it. So within about a week of discussing this with the group, they said, well, we got the down payment, $2,500, and we think we can raise more. So.
My name is John Hyde, and I've been involved with the Catholic Worker Movement for a number of years. And basically what I do here, I do have a part-time job outside the house. I live here. This is my home, and I like to think that it's our home with whoever is here at any given time.
We've only asked a handful of people of our 200 plus guests. I don't know, maybe we've asked 5 or 6 people to leave. Most of those were alcohol related. On the other hand, we've had a lot of people who have been guests here who would be labeled, paranoid schizophrenics and, and so on. And
People who've done long jail terms for violent acts.
Right. And they've lived here, and they've been wonderful people.
It's a leap of faith. Because the door is never locked, and sometimes we're not here, and if someone wanted to walk off with something, it would be really easy. But in the over 2 years that we've been doing this, nothing has really disappeared, or no one in our family's been hurt. And it's been, I think it's mostly faith.
My name is Tim Iverson. My wife and I was evicted out of our apartment because of the fact that there was about an inch of water through the whole apartment. We moved in here in January and stayed until the 1st of March. And after the first day, for me, it was like it was my home.
I was really shocked that there was some place like this up in Duluth. I could see like the Salvation Army or the Red Cross have something, but not just a family themselves.
And that makes a difference, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, a lot of difference. It's more of they treat you more as family.
They respect you.
Yes. And if it was like Tammy was saying, the Salvation Army is great and the Red Cross is great, but it's more of a business setting there. Here it's, you need socks. They got socks for you. If you need clothing, they'll get you clothing or help you get you clothing. They were like mother and father. And I've even joked around with Angie a little bit, saying, "Hey, Mom, what do I do next?"
There's another package too. It's spinach, and it came from a dumpster behind a grocery store, not too far from here. And it looks really good, doesn't it? Well, I'll just wash it extra good. And I guess we'll have it for dinner.
You do that pretty often?
Yeah, I think it's something we're going to start doing more this summer. Hard to do in the winter since everything freezes solid, but
That stuff looks good. I mean,
it does look good, doesn't it?
there's nothing wrong with that.
Looks better than some of the spinach I've paid for and brought home. Yeah, no, this stuff looks really good. Well, yeah, we only bring home the stuff that looks good and is still all wrapped up. And you'd be amazed what you can find in a dumpster.
Well, the Catholic worker movement was started by Peter Morin and Dorothy Day in the 1930s in New York. Dorothy Day had led a very interesting life, had hung out with Eugene O'Neill and kind of a lot of the socialist, communist, and progressive thinkers and writers on the East Coast, primarily in New York, had been a journalist, and union activist, and so on. And somewhere along there, she had a religious conversion, became Catholic, and then met this Peter Morin, who was kind of a wandering French philosopher. They started talking about how to lead their lives as Christians and decided that the way to do it was to open houses of hospitality for people in need. It was 1930s, it was New York City, there was plenty of need.
Initially, Catholic workers were Catholic, and there was Dorothy and others at the house went to church daily, and it's almost become a, Dorothy might not welcome this, but it's become just the name.
No, I'm not Catholic. That's true throughout the country. There's many Catholic worker houses all throughout the United States. And even in its early days, it was a very diverse movement that included all kinds of people of faith and also some of no faith. So no, you don't have to be Catholic.
I've been repulsed through the years by missionary efforts that were proselytizing, and I think for me that's the dark side of my own faith tradition. And it's come to a head in contemporary times for me with these various soup kitchens and missions where homeless folk come in and they're subjected to a sermon and then a meal. And so they have to endure Christianity in order to get what's really, really Christian, and that is a meal.
Well, when they come in the door, there's a small sign that says Loaves and Fishes Hospitality House. Used to be on the outside, but now it's on the inside. And if it weren't for that sign, when you walk in the door, this house looks just like any other house.
Do you call this dining room, living, dining? How you say dining room? Or like what we eat at? A kitchen, but...
Comedor.
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 Okay.
Comedor. Mesa de comedor.
I would say half or better of our food is donated in a few different ways. We get food, people bring in canned goods and everything, Somebody brought in a huge leg of lamb, order of a beef, turkeys, and so on, and boxes of things. And then about 3 nights a week, 3 nights a week we can count on, sometimes more, people bring in suppers.
My name is Liz Carlson, and I guess I came to be here because I work with Steve down in our affordable housing office. And as I worked and became more familiar with the office and with what Steve and Angie were doing here, it became increasingly more clear to me that the way I was living my home life was, very different than how I was living my work life.
My name's Frank Hurley, and I've really felt drawn to the Catholic worker movement for a long time. Some of my values are that manual labor, working with my hands in ways like washing dishes or building something or cleaning, is really fulfilling in a way that no other work I can think of is.
I was raised Catholic in a large family, very, very, very middle class. All of my family, with the exception of me, is still middle class.
I don't know if I'm Catholic. Sometimes I don't even know if I'm a Christian. But I just know that this is a way for me to live out my family's faith and still hold on to my own identity.
I'm kind of the alien of the family. And my family certainly has no idea where I came from. And really, for the most part, doesn't entirely understand what I'm choosing to do with my life now.
I gave up a job, gave up my apartment, and had for the time being to some close friends. And I asked myself if I was making a mistake, and I felt pretty scared.
This is what I'm interested in. This is a choice that I made, very aware of the consequences that it would have on certain other parts of my life. That doesn't mean that I can't spend time with other people or on dates. You know, certainly no one expects me to come here and be in a nunnery or anything like that. Yeah, that's certainly not part of it. And you know, I'm proud of this place. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm Carl. I'm 31 years old. Basically, I've been in different halfway houses out of state hospitals and things like that. After a 6-month commitment in the hospital, 3 different times, twice I came into Arrowhead House here in Duluth, and once I was down in a halfway house in Brainerd.
What's it like to live here, and especially compared to some of the other places you've been, the halfway houses? Do you like it here?
Well, in the halfway houses I stayed in, and then in the state hospitals and things like that, it seems like they never bring out the good things that you're doing. It always seems like they write the paperwork out on bad things that happen, you know. And in a place like this, it's you have a right to be your own person and live the way you want to live more, you know.
We see a lot of single people, particularly single men, who have chronic chemical dependency problems, and then to some degree the people who have chronic mental health problems. They do fine here. You know, there's a lot of support, there's a sense of family and community, and then they move out, and all they can afford to do is get like a single room somewhere, a lot of depressing ones, and they don't do well at all. You know, their lives kind of fall apart again. And our hope is that we could get a third house that would be a long-term place, you know, really kind of an open-ended place. So hopefully in the next 6 months or a year, we'll have a third house like that.
Read the caution. It says, emit showers of sparks, do not hold in hand. Place upright on level surface. Light fuse, get away. Use only under close adult supervision.
Give me one. Wasn't that cool? Some of these fly.
Careful now, Gabe.
They're better in the dark. No, I
Yeah,
can
you
throw.
want to save those for the
Here,
dark.
Mom, can I just...
Up until recently, there were many families who stayed here with many children. And sometimes that was really hard on our children, to have that many kids to share their toys with and to share their parents' time with. And, you know, they were outnumbered for a lot of last summer. And I think that was hard. But now we've opened another house, especially for families, and so most of the families will be there.
I've talked with Brianna a lot about this, and she does, you know, some days she's not so happy, other days she is. I will say that, you know, she's 6, she's starting to realize that most of her friends, well, really all of her friends, don't live in settings like this. You know, they don't live in communities. They don't share their houses with people. And so sometimes there's that, I think she has that sense of, you know, why can't we just be like everybody else? Which is, you know, seems pretty normal. Brendan, who's 3, you know, seems to really enjoy it almost all the time, you know, because there's a lot of stimulation and different people to play with, adults and kids. I think, you know, for him, he's pretty happy.
Actually, we have family day every Sunday, where the 4 of us leave the house, because if we're here it seems we're inevitably caught up in somebody's crisis. But if we can leave like we've been doing, and we leave for most of the day, then we, can maintain that sense of a family, which I think that helps a lot.
Well, a pretty diverse group of folks is gathered here. It looks like high school students and veterans and children and Catholic workers and just a whole bunch of folks. And what we do have in common is a sense that killing is wrong and war doesn't work. And so we're going to go as a group down to Dockside, where a warship annually comes for recruiting purposes, stand there with signs that express our concern, our feelings about the warship. We're going to distribute leaflets to folks, trying to just pass along education and information, and some will go on board the ship and hold a prayer service and refuse to leave in the tradition of nonviolent civil disobedience, direct action.
Kind of a inherent part of the philosophy of the Catholic worker movement is resistance to injustice and militarism.
We, as a government, have decided that we're going to spend half our budget on militarism, $300 billion a year, so we don't have enough housing for people, so we don't have enough jobs for people, and because of that we have homeless people. We don't have enough mental health care, so we have mentally ill people wandering the streets. We, as well as many, many other places, see those people firsthand. So in some ways, for us to just take care of people's needs and not to say, well, why are they homeless? Why are they refugees? Would be kind of shallow.
I was in a Rhode Island penitentiary for 10 and a half months for a plowshares action, hammering on a Trident submarine. And I got numerous letters from folks saying, John, you really should be out here. What are you doing in prison? We need you to be serving soup. And, the lines are getting longer, and we need more hands. And then I got to what I thought were really insightful, and they certainly were affirming letters of the time, people that were both on the soup line serving, friends of mine. And they said, John, we're glad you're there. And we're glad you're there because the lines are only getting longer. And as long as we only serve soup and bandage wounds, the lines of poor, disenfranchised, and wounded people are going to grow. And we need some bodies to get in the cogs of that system and say, enough is enough.
All right. This is our Mach 13 missile launcher. Has a capacity to shoot every 8 to 10 seconds. It launches SM-1 missiles, which is surface-to-air missiles, and Harpoon, which is surface-to-surface missiles.
God of peace, forgive us for celebrating the weapons of war.
Do you see a lot of this kind of protest in your travels with the recruiting ship?
No, this is the first instance of having protesters. It's very peaceful. They're not bothering anybody. They're smiling.
I think we lost some support during the Persian Gulf War. People who were either volunteering at the house or giving us money and were very much supportive of the work we were doing with homeless people. But when we were out being arrested at the Civic Center, they weren't supportive of that, and they didn't see the connection between homelessness and war the same way we do.
We had this wonderful plumber who was doing the majority of the plumbing work on Hannah House, our new house for families, for free, and very nice man. But when the war started and he saw us on TV protesting, he was just outraged. He was very upset. I mean, so upset that he really didn't even want to talk about it. He just, I'm not doing any more work there.
garlic it up. 5 years from now, I'm sure I'll be here, and Steve will be here, but I'm not positive everyone else will be here. The other community members, I'm not sure.
It would be unrealistic for me to say that this is it, this is the end, period. At age 23, I don't think that would be realistic and truthful. And so all I can do for now is to commit to at least a year, but most probably longer than that. And while I'm here, to commit wholeheartedly to what I'm doing.
Within the Catholic Worker, my experience has been that there are several kinds of folks. There are those folks like Steve and Angie who have clearly set down a local permanent presence. You have a second kind of group of folks, and I think that perhaps I fall into that category. In one sense, we're kind of like the migrant Catholic workers moving from place to place.
I can imagine doing it for years. I think one of the challenges that we'll have is as our children grow up, what they'll want to do, when they become teenagers, for example. They might not choose this life, and so maybe we'll have to take a break from it. But hopefully they will.
I don't think we really look at what we're doing as a sacrifice. I mean, my parents used to say this too. Every night you go to bed and you know that you somehow made a difference in somebody's life. And so there's a lot of, happiness or peace that comes from that, I think. It's feels good.
Yeah, you should have been here last night. We had a food fight for real. Carrots and ice cream and potato salad.
There's a verse, and I think it's in Ephesians, and it says something about, you should be kind to everybody because you never know when you're entertaining angels unaware. And Dorothy Day talked a lot about this too, is that in every person you can see Christ. And so for that reason alone, you should treat everyone with dignity and respect. And there's a few people who've come here who just are mysterious enough and special enough in their own way that you just wonder if they're not really some kind of an angel. Oh, there's just something about them, and they're just special. And probably the ones who are really angels are the ones that even I don't suspect. They're probably the ones who have been the hardest to love and hardest to live with.
Yeah, but when they come on every Thursday, 7 o'clock, the main one. Let's help set get the food ready.
The House of Loaves and Fishes was produced by Minnesota Public Radio's Stephen Smith, technical director John Scherf. The music was written and performed by Bob Ekstrand. Financial support provided by the Northwest Area Foundation. This documentary, by the way, was produced in 1991. The House of Loaves and Fishes is still operating in Duluth. In fact, a third house was opened a few years ago. Steve O'Neil and Angie Miller live down the street. Well, that does it for our midday program today. I'd like to thank you for joining us and invite you to join us tomorrow. Part of our midday program tomorrow, we'll go off to the National Press Club. The Press Club is gearing up again for a speech by the President of the American Federation of Teachers. Today's programming is supported by financial contributions from Minnesota Public Radio listeners.